the Day of Ethics, and our session today is on the line between advocacy and journalism. My name is Rachele, and I'm Associate Professor of Journalism here at San Francisco State. And we're going to be having a discussion with Rose Aguilar and with Rick Rocamora. And we often talk about journalism afflicting the comfortable and comforting the afflicted. And many of us went into journalism with the idea of this being a way of expressing our interest in social justice. We wanted to change the world. We wanted to right wrongs and reveal truth. And in this department, in fact, social justice is part of our mission. It's part of what we see ourselves teaching all of you. But there's also this idea of objectivity. For those of you who were in the session this morning with Martin Reynolds, we talked about how objectivity, that whole concept of objectivity is, I wouldn't say exactly being put aside, but we're questioning here in journalism, we're questioning that whole concept of objectivity. So today we're going to talk about this idea of the intersection between advocacy and journalism. And one question I'm going to raise for our panel and raise for all of you is, are we as journalists all secretly activists in some way? Are we trying to get a certain message out? Are we trying to expose certain things? So I'll just let you sit with that for a little while. We're going to start by showing a video of a news event that happened that kind of unfurled over the last few weeks. So, Rick, could you play this?
Sure.
Riot charge. For Democracy Now! Is reporting on an attack against Native American
Can we give a little context?
Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
Can you pause it?
Security
Sure.
guards working for the Dakota Access Pipeline.
I just wanted to.
Yeah, okay.
The report showed
Can you pause
Yeah,
it?
can you, yeah, and
Okay.
also can you go back to the beginning?
So I just want to give you all a little context about this. First of all, actually, I'd love to know how. Do you want to introduce?
Also, yeah, I was going to introduce you too.
I wanted to give you a little context about the video first.
Okay.
So and then we'll do introductions.
Okay, we'll do that.
So have you all heard about the Dakota Access Pipeline in North Dakota by a raise of hands? Okay. So this is a $3.8 billion oil pipeline that is going to run from the Bakken fields in North Dakota down to Illinois. And initially, when the pipeline was constructed, it was supposed to go north of Bismarck, which is the capital of North Dakota. It's 80 to 90% white. And for various reasons, people there did not want that pipeline there because a possible rupture could affect the drinking supply. So then it was rerouted to basically go to the Standing Rock Sioux tribe's doorstep. Now that piece of information should be the lead in a lot of stories, and it's not. Most people don't know about that. So back in April, a few people started camping on the reservation to basically express opposition to the pipeline. It has since grown. I was there last week. Members from 300 different tribal nations from across the country have been there or are there camping. At its height, it was about 5,000. When I was there, there were 2,000. There has been a wide range of media coverage about it, and this video that we're going to show you now is from Democracy Now! Are you familiar with Democracy Now! So I have to say, as a journalist, Amy Goodman got so lucky on the weekend that she went, because the camp is about 2 miles from the front line, and that's where a few people are camping. And when she arrived, this is what she saw.
Okay.
Also, Rick, can we put it back to the beginning?
Oh.
Declassifying the emails.
Okay.
Right there?
I don't think that's right.
The beginning was
Oh,
the,
no. Oh, okay.
it started, the
Yeah.
programming
Or do you
started.
want to go a little further?
For declassifying.
Okay.
There you
There.
go.
Yeah.
Slahi has been released back
No,
to his home
that's not
country of Mauritania after being
It's
held
not
at
showing.
Guantanamo since 2002 without charge or trial. Slahi wrote the
Okay.
has asked a federal court in Texas to throw out a subpoena
Nope.
from New York State that would force the oil company has reportedly cut ties to the Russian-backed broadcaster RT.
Okay,
The
hold on.
station, which relies on state funds from Moscow.
Hold on.
You know what, maybe we should refresh it, because it comes in at right.
Okay,
Just the
let
right
me do the other.
You can, do you want me to find it? I know exactly where it is.
Yeah,
Okay,
why don't you do that?
Thank you.
yeah.
Actually, while Rose is doing that, I will introduce her. So Rose Aguilar has been host of Your Call on KALW since 2006. And in the show, Rose talks with guests about a whole range of social issues, really the deep issues of our day, refugees, sexual assault, police shootings, violence, human rights abuses. I mean, she covers it all. And it's actually a thrill for me to be on
Thank you.
the podium here with her, because I listen to the show all the time. Before joining KALW, she published a newsletter about women's issues and was a reporter and weekend host for CNET Radio, where she covered technology's impact on society. And she's also written for Al Jazeera English, Truth Out, The Nation, and Alternet. And so why don't I also do a quick introduction of Rick, and then we'll watch the video. So in a headline a few years ago, Rick Rocamora was described as an award-winning lensman with an activist lens. He's won awards for his images and pictures from Asian American Journalists Association, SF Bay Area Press Photographers Association, New California Media, Media Alliance, and many other organizations. His work has been widely exhibited in national and international museums and galleries, including the Court of St. James in the United Kingdom, and the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo, the Smithsonian, the Center for Photographic Arts, the Museum of Photographic Arts, and other venues. He's documented the day-to-day lives of Filipino veterans in the book America's Second-Class Veterans. And he's also worked on projects about Muslim Americans after 9/11, immigrant entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, and overseas Filipinos. And so he'll be showing his work in a few minutes as well, and talking about what it feels like to have things that he wants to say and to be saying them with his photojournalism. Okay, did we find the right
Yes.
spot? Okay,
Okay,
great, thank you.
Oh, you guys are criminals!
this one?
Go get your money somewhere else!
We're standing at the construction site of the Dakota Access Pipeline. It looks like there are at least 3 bulldozers that are, to people's surprise at this moment, actually bulldozing the land. There's a helicopter above, there's security here, and hundreds of people have been marching up when they heard that the construction site is actually active right now.
My name is Jacob Johns.
And where are you from?
I'm from Spokane, Washington. I'm hoping to help them out.
And can you describe what you see, what they're doing?
They're bulldozing. They're bulldozing and preparing to install a pipeline to go into the Ethan River.
And above we see a helicopter.
The helicopter itself is following us and taking pictures, and we're filming them during certain.
People have gone through the fence, men, women, and children. The bulldozers are still going, and they're yelling at the men in hard hats. One man in hard hat threw one of the protesters down, and they're marching over the dirt mounds. Some of the security have dogs. The 6 bulldozers are pulling back right now. People are marching forward in their tracks. There are men, women, and children. More security trucks are pulling up. There are some protesters on horseback. Security has some kind of gas. People are being pepper sprayed. We are not leaving! We are not leaving! We are not leaving! spraying people?
That's great.
What way is that?
Yeah, just makes me in the face right now. Amy Goodman, this guy makes me in the face. Look, it's all over my sunglasses. Just makes me in the face. A dog. Dog bit him right now. Dog on me. This fucker throw the dog on me. Throw the dog on me. Oh, you did it on purpose, man. Over there, to that dog. I was like walking, throw the dog on me straight, even without any warning, you know? Look at this. Look at this. The dog did it, you know? Look at this.
Man, your dog just bit a protester. Are you telling the dogs to bite the protester? The dog has blood in its nose and its mouth.
And she's still standing here expecting. You can't put your phone on the dog. You're gonna get your You can't put your phone on These people are just threatening all of us with these dogs. And she, that woman over there, she was charging them. It bit somebody right in the face. And then it charged at me and tried to bite me, and they're still threatening to stop the next fast. We're not doing anything.
Why are you letting her dog out?
Okay, so,
To people's surprise at this moment.
oh, Rick, if you could turn that on. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So I have a question for all of you. Amy Goodman, who was the person with the microphone there, do you think she was acting as an activist there or as a journalist?
At an activist location?
Okay, so I think it was pretty clear she was acting as a journalist, but the state's attorney for North Dakota, a guy named Ladd Erickson, said that she was acting as an activist. And at first she was charged with trespassing, then she was charged with rioting, and then finally on Monday, a North Dakota state judge said no, she wasn't. And they threw out the charges, although apparently the state's attorney is still looking into something he can charge her with. So I wanted to show that video to give you a sense of how, even if we see ourselves as journalists, sometimes the people that we're covering or the people who are involved in situations see us as activists or pretend to see us as activists. So I thought we would kind of open it up and start talking a little bit about that. Rose?
So on Monday, they refused to authorize riot charges against Amy Goodman. I think the important thing about this is, where were the other cameras? Why isn't there more attention on this issue? Are you all familiar with this? Have you seen these dogs? After she got the video, a number of other media outlets also aired it. But where's the national media? You know, why won't they ask questions about this at the debate tonight? It's a perfect question. Climate change has not come up at all, and this ties right into it. So, you know, I was at Standing Rock a couple weeks ago. What's not being reported is you have to drive through a checkpoint just to get there. There are these young National Guards standing, and they ask you if you've been here before. They're very nice. They seem really bored, frankly, but it's a form of intimidation. And, you know, as a journalist, I think it's okay to say that. You know, the other thing we have to ask is it okay to call this environmental racism? I mean, why is it okay for the pipeline to go to the doorstep of the tribe, but not north of Bismarck, which is 80% white? And why hasn't that been included in the stories? I mean, I think that needs to be the lead. And the other part of the story that's not being told is, who are all these people who are camping at Standing Rock? When I was there, it was 40 degrees, which is so cold for someone from California, but it's starting to dip, and they're planning to stay throughout the winter. So there's so many different aspects to this story. And, you know, whether you call it, I don't know, this word advocacy, I'd like to talk about this, because I just think that word is interesting in and of itself, and this whole notion of, you know, being balanced. Well, you know, is the oil company talking to journalists? Is the sheriff giving interviews? People who've been arrested are being strip searched. They're being strip searched and forced to squat and cough for basically being at this site. You know, why isn't this getting more attention? Print, definitely. Cable shows, Hardly at all. And in fact, fairness and accuracy in reporting found that, I think it was ABC, has not done anything on this at all. So it's very clear, and I think it's okay as a journalist to say that, you know, police officers from all over the state are coming in. They're also asking police from outside the state to come in. And why? What are they trying to hide? Well, this. And this is why it's so important to have a journalist there with a camera to document what's happening. And because we don't have much of that, so many people, as you know, are telling their own stories through social media. And I also have heard, I'm going to do a story about this, that the Bismarck Press is calling these people terrorists, saying that they're armed, which is not true. At the camp, there's a big sign that says, if you're armed or if you have any drugs, you will be kicked out. So they are emphasizing the fact that they are unarmed and peaceful. They're doing this to protect their drinking supply, which also provides drinking water to 18 million people. Have you heard that fact? I mean, there's just so many facts around this story that have not been reporting. I mean, this is just basic journalism. Why are they there? What are they protecting? What are the politics behind the pipeline?
Thank you. No, we have
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, Rick, we can switch gears a little bit. I don't know if you want to say anything about this particular story or you want to talk about the work that you've been doing.
Well, I think in relation to what's happening in North Dakota, I think it's important. If I'm in knowing myself as an advocate for a lot of issues, I'll be reporting exactly what Amy Goodman is doing. In fact, my focus as a visual journalist would be to document how these people, the guards are using the dogs, because that's the most important part. Part of our role as a photojournalist or documentary photographer is expose errors, mistakes committed by others, because without us, nobody will know about them. There are so many forces in journalism that's trying to hide this. Very few are taking a chance or taking a stand on issues, and that's very important. All of us have biases, you know, and we have our own perspective and own point of view. Very few are representing people without voices. So for us as visual journalists, our responsibility is to provide visual voice for those people. It's not about us, it's always about them. And that's the most important part that we have to consider in our work day to day.
And when you're talking about Native Americans, when you think about the media coverage that is given to Native Americans, what is it usually about? Can you just throw some words out? Casinos, reservations, the poverty on reservations, the suicide on reservations, the alcohol, right? That's pretty much it. And if you go here, if you go to Standing Rock or anywhere else and ask people, well, and they'll say, yes, we are dealing with this, but let's talk about why. And let's talk about what else, how are we overcoming these obstacles? So that's the other piece of the story. And that's what a good journalist would do, is go beyond that. Yes, cover that, but give people some context. Why are the suicide rates so high to begin with? Why is it in 2005, there was a reservation in Montana on the foot of Glacier National Park. They just got paved roads and mailboxes in 2005. Why? So, you know, in addition to telling that side, you need to go further and ask these really basic questions, I think. Sometimes the basic questions are the best. On my radio show, sometimes my producers will give me questions that are a big paragraph, which are fine. But sometimes, why did that happen? Is so, it brings out so much information. Why did you bring dogs to this protest? Or actually, they're calling themselves water protectors. Excuse me, Mr. Sheriff, why are people being told to strip search, forced to strip search? What's the legality behind that? Just basic questions. I think sometimes those bring up sometimes the best answers.
Indeed. So Rick, do you want to show some of your work?
Sure.
Where you're coming from?
When I was invited here, I was told to present some of my work. Just to give you a little background, I came from a different I was selling pharmaceuticals for 18 years. I was a regional manager for a pharmaceutical company here in the States and responsible for millions of dollars. But somebody gave me a camera and I get, involved with documentary photography. So I gave up my work, my corporate life, so I could make less money. So in doing, I end up doing this kind of work because if I cannot do this work, I'll go back selling and make a better lifestyle for myself. So at the initial stage of my career, I got involved with the issue of Filipino World War II veterans. These are Filipinos who were granted citizenship based on the Immigration Act of 1990, Section 405. They served during the war, in the Second World War. But the U.S. reneged on their promise of citizenship. The U.S. also passed a law, the Rescission Act of 1946, that said that Filipinos who fought in the Second World War, if they lost their arm, they got wounded, given the Purple Heart, is only entitled to 50% of the benefits. So their lives is 50 cents to $1. So while I was starting my career as a documentary photographer, I got involved with the issue. So I spent 18 years of my life documenting that struggle of Filipinos who were veterans who are living in the States waiting for equity. I've testified on commissions. I had my work exhibited at the U.S. Congress, become part of the congressional record, and really became an advocate of that particular issue. That's the kind of work I'm doing now and I've done before. I don't have pictures that I brought with me on the project, but here's a book and you can pass it around. But for the last, I quit my job in 1990. So 1991, I started my career as a documentary photographer. Right after 9/11, I got involved with the story of Muslims. So what I did is, actually, the scene is how it happens. I was driving on Telegraph Avenue, listening to NPR, and there was somebody from San Francisco on a peace rally delivering a very powerful speech. I parked my car, listened to her speech, and then right after that, went to a mosque in Oakland and introduced myself. And I said, I'm a documentary photographer. I'm gonna do my best to document your community because nobody knows who you are. So that's my goal and that was my purpose. So these are some of the images that I made during those years. Okay, hold on. Why is this? Okay, here. How can I remove that? Huh?
Just click on the.
I cannot see my. Where's my? Won't show. Sorry. Okay. Aha. So now I could play here. Okay. So the title of the project is Freedom and Fear, Bay Area Muslims After 9/11. I spent 10 years documenting this. It could have been a book. Somebody was giving me $50,000 to produce the book, but the donor is asking me to include some of his friends to the project. They're Muslims. They're involved in the issue, but I decided this is not the way I like to do it. So I decided not to get the book published. So we just celebrated the anniversary of 9/11, 15 years after. So I'm going back to my subjects now and looking for specific subjects that I photographed 10 years ago and asking this the question, what happened in the last 10 years? Did America knew you better, or your life has changed after all this debate and issues about Muslims living in America? And personally, I think it's gotten worse. So my goal now is to go back to that community and say, what can you say? America would like to listen to you. America would like to listen to your voice, because during the last 15 years, nobody heard who you are, nobody know who you are and what your purpose in life in America. So these are some of the images I took 15 years ago. This is in San Francisco in a mosque, downtown San Francisco. This is Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf was visited by the FBI in Dublin. And when the wife said, "Oh, where is your Hamza Yusuf?" "Oh, he's not here. He's in Washington." "What do you mean Washington?" "He's meeting with George W. Bush as a guest at the White House to talk about Muslims." That's how, you know, they don't know what they're doing. This is a store in Oakland. At that time, for those young kids, you don't know that every day, every hour, CNN is showing the picture of Osama bin Laden. Basim Alkara, the one at the center, was debating with Republicans in UC Berkeley. Basim Alkara is now the head of CARE in Sacramento. Senator Boxer gave him an award, but withdrew the award when he found out that Basim Alkara is a Palestinian. So he just got elected as a, I think, member of the board of the School of Supervisors in Sacramento. This is Elizabeth Ackerley, who went to San Francisco State. She went to Brown University, got converted to Islam when she was in Japan, and now teaching in an Islamic school and married to an Egyptian with kids and playing Aikido. Is it Aikido or? I think so. I'm sorry. This is in Berkeley in one of the events at the Berkeley campus. So Muslims at that time became a tourist attraction. Japanese tourists, "Can you take your pictures?" So this is one of those scenes. This is a madrasa in Oakland. I was walking around, I saw these young Muslim children and said, "Where are you guys coming from?" "Oh, there's a madrasa there." So I introduced myself and photographed these kids while they're studying on Sunday the Quran. This is at the immigration. There was a period during that time when ICE was requiring immigrants to report to immigration just because they're Muslims, without any problem with their papers. Just because they're Muslims and they're immigrants, they're required to report. And this is part of the demonstration. This is at Hayward when at the beginning of the after 9/11, when Ahmad Shah Massoud was killed in Afghanistan. So this is one of the immigrants reporting to the immigration. When he was in Sudan, his ears was chopped. So that's the picture. This is at Eid at the Indonesian consulate. This is Javed Khan, who sold his company to Microsoft for $400 million. He's from Silicon Valley, and he was attending the demonstration against Iraq, the war in Iraq on Market Street. So these are young students, Muslim students from Berkeley, who went to Santa Cruz to shoot paintball. At the same time, during this time I was doing this, there's a group of Muslims in Virginia shooting paintball were arrested because they were told they're practicing to fight a war. This is in San Jose, when the Muslims have to pray and see how they look at the attitude of the people on the park. Okay, so among those pictures I presented, those will be the ones that I'm going to go back and look for them and ask them the question, what do you think happened in the last 15 years? Share your thoughts, share your ideas, and also a review of what their life, what happened to them, especially the children. And the truth is, among the Muslims in America, their income level is above the average. Most of them are academics in medicine and entrepreneurs. In fact, there was one guy in Silicon Valley, his name is Mohammed Hussein. And he said, every time I travel, I'm being stopped. And yet this guy sold his company for $800 million. So, but because of his name, automatic, he's being stopped. So that's the situation of the Muslims after 9/11. So this kind of work I had exhibited, published, and the whole work. It could have been a book, but because the one giving me the money said, can we include some of my friends? And I said no. Okay? So you like me to continue?
Sure. Why don't you
Okay.
continue with it?
So that's one of the projects I've done work on in Silicon Valley. The title is Silicon Raj, Making a Difference to America's Future. These are the guys who created Pentium, Hotmail.com, Windows Media. Without them, we don't have all this, the Qualcomm, the mind on our cell phone was created by Indians and Chinese in San Diego. But we don't recognize them. We always say, oh, they're H-1B, they're taking our jobs. But these people made our life better and easier, not only in America, but worldwide. So when people ask me, so you see people walking around with salwar kameez in Silicon Valley or anywhere, you have to say, probably she's the owner or the wife of the owner of my company. A lot of what's happened in the last 15 years in Silicon Valley, most of the entrepreneurs who've been successful are immigrants, and most of them are from India and China. Okay, so that's the kind of advocacy work I've been doing. And there are more. My focus in the US is about immigrant rights and civil liberties and contributions of immigrants to America. You know why I'm doing that? It's because other people are already looking the problem of the immigrants. What's bad about them? Why they're not supposed to be here? If I will include myself as a documentary photographer to focus on that, who will do the good part of them, their contribution to our country? So that's the focus of my work. And in the Philippines, I'm Filipino, born and raised there. I came here when I was 27 years old. I've been living here since 1972. My focus is social justice and human rights. So over the years, I keep coming back because I don't live there. My focus is always my concern about my own country. And for those who are immigrants or become visual journalists, we have a responsibility as journalists to look from where we came from. And with the experience we have here, we'll have a better understanding on how to present our country to the world. And that's part of the experience we gain in America. One of the projects that I've done in the Philippines is about detainees. One of the justices of the Supreme Court said, I need a photographer to document overcrowding and conditions in jail. We don't have a budget, and I volunteered. But it's one of the hardest work that I'm doing because every time to gain access is always difficult. I started doing this in 2010, and I'm still doing it. So hopefully it become a book. I'll share you, this is a mock-up of the work we're doing, human wrongs, and I'll just flip quickly on the body of work. This is a solitary confinement. In the Philippines, part of the problem is the court system, record keeping, delay in the hearings. So most detainees spend so much time in jail. And some of them, when they are sentenced, are released because they spend more time in jail than the actual sentence. There are detainees who die in jail because of lack of medical attention. These are some of the pictures for that project. They're doing a count at overcrowding. This is how it looks inside the jail. This is actually a chapel, but being used as a sleeping quarters for detainees. Detainees at the Quezon City Detention Center are taking turns in sleeping because the capacity is 700. Sometimes there are about 4,000 people there. There are 300 Muslims in that, and this is Friday prayers. These are visitors to the detention center. So since 2010, I've been to about 5 or different places, but every time getting access is so difficult. So slowly but surely, I'm able to collect materials. You know the famous dancing inmates of Cebu? This is one of the rehearsals. This is the women's section. This is, they call them Apple. She was 35 when I took her picture. She was raped by her grandmother's common law husband. She left and became a sex worker. She has 5 kids from different fathers. And when she was in jail because of drug-related crime, she surrendered 3 of the children to their fathers. By the way, all the fathers are all electrical engineers. And the 2 were taken care of by a neighbor. So that's one of the work that I've done in the Philippines, which is the KALW book. It's about an area which used to be the center of commerce, society, and everything in the Philippines about 50, 60 years ago. But now it's a rundown place, and people say, don't go there. They'll take your money, they'll pickpocket, all those kind of stuff. But I've been going there with my Leica and my cameras for the last 5 years. And during the process of going there, I photographed a young girl sleeping on the street. And it's been my practice to go back to the area where I photographed. And it so happened when I went back, I found out that she was a high school student. Part of my practice also as an advocate for some of the work I'm doing is to do show and tell. I share this to people. And in that process, a friend of mine, where I show the work, I said, why don't I give her a college scholarship? So Rodalie, that's her name, was given a college scholarship. And she graduated last April this year. And she's now working for one of the top companies in Asia. So I'll share with you a short video clip. This is my first video that I've done as a documentary photographer.
Dito po sa amin sa Quiapo, halos lahat ng kabataan, mga naliligaw ng landas. Ayaw ko po matulad sa kanila. Gusto ko po maiba. Na-appreciate ko nga po na napakahirap ng dinaranas namin. Kaya gusto ko po makapagtapos ng pag-aaral. Unang-una po, gusto ko po talagang magpasalamat sa inyo. Nung bata po ako, pag may sakit po si mama, pag wala po kami pamilyang pagkain, nanghihingi po ako ng pagkain sa mga nagtitinda po doon. Nangungutang po ako sa kanila, sabi ko, paglaki ko po, babayaran ko na lang po ito. kung sa nakikita mo natutulog ka sa kali, ayun talaga yung nag-uutot sa akin para po na makaalis dun. Actually po nga po, kinakabahan ako. Pag-again pa yung hindi na po talaga ako. Para kasi kung babalikan ko po kasi sa unang-una po, parang baka nga po minsan, baka nanaginip lang po ako. Baka nanaginip lang po ito kasi hindi ko po talaga akalain na matatapos po ako. Sobrang saya ko po, naiiyak-iyak po ako kasi lahat ng paghihirap ko po is natapos na. Nagpapasalamat po ako sa inyo at binigyan niyo po ako ng pagkakataon mag-aaral. Lagi po pinagdarasal na sana po someday makabawi naman po ako.
Are you still in touch with her?
Oh yeah, we still chat on Facebook regularly.
Wow.
Thank you. So I wanted to talk about this word advocacy. You brought this up, Rose. Let's talk about advocacy in journalism. What is the role of advocacy? And do you feel comfortable using the word advocacy and journalism in the same sentence?
Well, I just want to know, so you're all journalism students? Are you planning to go into journalism? What kind? Radio, TV, writing, all of the above? Yeah, all of you? Okay. So I have to just apologize to all of you on behalf of this profession that I love for the coverage of Donald Trump. Really, I often wonder what journalism professors are talking about in their classes with students, because it's just shocking what has happened over the last year. I think it's one of the most shameful media moments in my lifetime, and hopefully yours, with the exception of the failure of most of the media to ask hard questions in the lead up to the US invasion of Iraq. Last year, or earlier this year, Donald Trump got, I want to make sure I have my numbers right, $2 billion worth of free media attention. And this was a study conducted by the New York Times. And he's a media creation. On my show, we barely talked about him earlier this year because he wasn't saying anything. And he's really still not saying anything. Although if you do look at his policies, which, what does the man really stand for, right? I'm actually kind of speechless sometimes when I think about it. And in some ways, the coverage of this election has just gone in the gutter, from Fox News in some ways to NPR. And I work for an NPR affiliate. Because, where's the information? Where are the facts? And I feel like I've been turned into this sort of raging advocacy journalist because of the election, just trying to get the truth out there and really speaking the truth about what we're dealing with right now. And it's really shameful to me that more journalists aren't speaking the truth. After the vice presidential debate, and are you all watching the debates? As journalism students, you really should watch these debates. And then go read and listen to the radio, listen to how these analysts, talking heads, analyze the debate. Okay, the Mike Pence debate I think was really interesting because after that debate, people on NPR said, you know, Mike Pence is this calm Christian man. He's got a calm demeanor, and I think he's going to make Republicans very comfortable after the Donald Trump debate. How many of you know anything about Mike Pence's policies? A few? All right, so Mother Jones, which you could consider an advocacy magazine, they've got a few things here that I think is really, really important to expose about Mike Pence. He co-sponsored an amendment that would have prohibited same-sex marriage. He voted against the Employee Non-Discrimination Act, which is aimed to prevent job discrimination based on sexual orientation. Between 2006 and 2009, he voted against raising the minimum wage. He voted against expanding health coverage for low-income kids. He voted against providing funding for Section 8 vouchers. He refused to comply with the Obama administration rules aimed at reducing prison rape. Okay, why isn't that getting more attention? He has passed some of the most extreme anti-abortion laws. One of the provisions in this law would require an aborted fetus to have a funeral. Okay, this is, you can say it's extreme. When you look at polling from the Wall Street Journal, 70% of the country believes that Roe v. Wade is the law of the land. That's a massive percentage. And yet the media tell us that this issue is divisive. I guess I'm just so frustrated by all of this because we're fed this pack of lies about this country being divided. And I don't think that's the case at all. The media are giving the people with the most extreme views the microphone. And so this is what we hear day in and day out. And so, you know, someone like maybe me would be called an advocacy journalist simply because I bring up the fact that actually, if you look at where people stand on healthcare, money in politics, abortion, education funding, you name it, it's 60, 70, 80%. And yet that's not reflected in the reporting. So in my mind, I mean, we're talking about...
Do you see yourself as an advocacy journalist?
I don't care to tell you the truth. I guess in some ways, am I an advocacy journalist because I give people a voice, because I try to bring in these different facts, because I go to Standing Rock and interview Native Americans about their history, because I allow people to tell their own stories or shine a spotlight on injustice? I mean, does that make me an advocacy journalist? I guess in this climate, it sure does. But I don't really have a problem with that. What do you think?
Well, I think people make choices in our careers. We can be a very objective journalist working for a paper, balancing both sides. But the truth is, all of us have our own biases. And some of those biases are reflected on how we do the story. And we cannot avoid that. So I think if you have a strong opinion on something, do it. For all the years that I've been working on these different projects, I never had to make adjustment on my point of view on the materials I present for publication, for exhibition, and things like that. Because take it or leave it. This is how I see this story, and this is how I think your audience should take it. I'm so proud of what I do as an advocate for these issues. The only problem is my bank account is very low. But there are ways to make money being an advocate for this kind of issues. There are grants, there are fellowships. The Muslim work, aside from that 50,000 that was being given to me, there was a guy in Silicon Valley for a year was giving me $1,500 every 2 months. No string attached. The check arrives on my mailbox because they recognize that I need help, because they know where will I get published occasionally. I get grants. I get some grants from California Council of Humanities. The KALW book was published because 3 of my friends gave me $5,000 each. And this is an idea that I developed. Probably it's not original, but about Kickstarters, we target all our friends to give us money for a project. Why don't you start looking at your list of friends first and say, who are the people among my friends could give me $1,000, $500? Go to them first. And out of that, because some of those friends that you have will give you the $50 you're asking on a Kickstarter, but they'll be willing to give more if you approach them in such a way and said, if you give me 500 or 1,000 now, it will reduce my goal for my Kickstarter. And definitely I'll be able to put together this project. So that's what I did. I called on 3 of my friends and said, do you have $5,000? So what for? I'd like to produce the project of the KALW book and Rodalie Musende. Part of the reason for that is twofold. One is I really like to share the story. And the second, I'd like also to develop the bookmaking photo book industry in the Philippines. So the whole project was designed by a Filipino. I took the pictures, was printed in the Philippines and everything, and financed by Filipinos. So that's how I find a way to finance myself to do this kind of work. During the early years, I'm doing work for University of California. I have 5 accounts that pays my bills on a month-to-month basis. When you're doing this kind of work, you have to have what we call an anchor account. Somebody that for 6 months will give you enough money to survive so you can continue your work. Because no matter what, we need to have money to make it, to do this kind of work. And I came from a marketing background. So when I do a project, I start from the beginning. Right from the beginning, I know where will it end, what kind of distribution channels I will use, how will I fund it, where will I go, and all this kind of stuff. It's all pre-planned. Because without that, you'll be grappling for resources along the way. And it's so important that we make our plans. And you know, the truth is, this kind of work, there are so many people out there who are willing to help us. All we have to do is share this information. Because people with money, because they cannot do this work, they're very busy making, lawyers and making money for their corporation. They're willing to share those if they know that it will go to benefit an important issue, an important cause that will educate others, that will, help others understand the issues of the day. So I think I'd like to share that part because I know it's hard when you do this kind of work. And where will I get my money for my next meal?
Especially if you're freelancing, it's kind of shocking to learn about the rates that publications pay. I mean, these days, you're lucky if you get $500 for a long, well-reported article in a magazine, for an independent publication, for example. It's really, really difficult to freelance these days. Unfortunately, the rates have just come down. But I agree with the Kickstarter and all of those different platforms are a great vehicle. But ideally, depending on the kind of work you do, it would be nice to have a monthly check so you can pay your bills. And I really, really emphasize the fact, always ask for something. I think too many people work for free. Unfortunately, when the Huffington Post started, they said, well, you're going to blog for us and your name will get out there. That's great. Well, I'd like to be paid something, even if it's $50. I especially tell women this. If you're asked to speak on a panel, or just ask for something, right, to cover your costs. We're just in this sort of world of working for free, and it's really important to ask for what you're worth. And usually they'll give you a little more than what you think you're worth. That's really, especially for women, because we're still paid less than men. And I just want to say, I did not mean to throw your question aside about advocacy, but as someone who, I've hosted my radio show for 10 years, we talk about so many serious issues. We talk about nuclear weapons and poverty and immigration. We did a show today about a disability film festival that's taking place in Berkeley and San Francisco this weekend. When do we ever have conversations about people with disabilities? So here we are, a team of 3 of us, doing these shows day after day after day. On Thursdays, we're actually doing an extra hour from 11 to noon because there's so much on the ballot. Are you all registered to vote? Okay, if not, you have 5 days. Please register. So in San Francisco, we are voting on 25 measures. In California, it's 17 for a total of 42, affecting everything from taxes to the death penalty, plastic bag bans, prisons, homelessness, affordable housing, you name it, and it's on the ballot. Well, who has time to keep up with all of this, right? So we're doing an extra hour from 11 to noon on Thursdays just to focus on this. So I'm doing my research and I do the show, and then I turn on the radio or the television, and it's nonsense. It's utter nonsense. You don't learn anything. I watched Meet the Press on Sunday. Mike Pence cleaned up Chuck Todd's clock. I mean, it was unbelievable. It's just, I feel like more journalists who are doing serious work really need to come out and say, okay, wait a minute, what is happening to our profession? This is really unacceptable. I mean, again, I think we're doing such a disservice to all of you because there's so many things to talk about. You know, racism, Black Lives Matter. I mean, that's getting attention thanks to people telling their own stories and thanks to social media. So I'm really frustrated. I think there's great journalism happening right now, especially online, but you have to look for it. It's not always being shared on Facebook. Like ProPublica, Reveal is doing great work. There's so many good investigative outlets that are doing really good work, but they don't always sort of rise above that little bubble that they're already in. You know, we find amazing work that's being done. BuzzFeed has a great investigative outlet. I mean, I would really urge all of you, and I'm sure you talk about this in your classes, but depending on the kind of work you want to do, these companies talking about Silicon Valley, they've got money, Vice, BuzzFeed, and they have really, really good investigative units. So I would say don't settle to it's so hard to make ends meet if you're just freelancing and kind of trying to find the next job, but try to find gigs at some of these organizations, maybe intern, but they do have money and they're doing really good work. The problem is the cable shows are the ones with the massive microphone, and they're doing horrible work right now. Horrible work. And I think we should come out and say that. Because for those of us that are doing the hard work, I mean, we're in public radio. I mean, luckily, yes, you know, we get paychecks, but we have to ask our listeners for money twice a year because we don't get funding from corporations. And that is why we're able to do this kind of work. You know, shows about a disability rights film festival, or who really is Mike Pence? You know, what is this man's policy? Who really is Hillary Clinton, for that matter? What is she going to do when she becomes president?
I have some other questions, but I think perhaps people in the audience do too. So I'm going to throw it out to all of you if you have questions. And if not, I have some more things that I'd like to ask.
Yeah, I'd like to find out what you're interested in. And, you know, I'm looking at you right now, such a diverse group. Okay, if you all ran a radio station, it could be so vibrant. I mean, I will say this. I think diversity in the media is so, so important. I recently lost my Native American grandparents. And as a product of divorce, I don't really talk about my background, but lately I have been. So I'm talking about the fact that I'm a Native American journalist. There are so few of us. And NPR recently put out this graphic of the journalists that work for NPR. They looked at the population versus the people who work at NPR. Okay, whites, like this. Asians, Latinos, Blacks, Native American, 0. We're not even included usually in statistics. So I would say, be proud of who you are, where you come from. Bring that to your work with you because it shapes what you do. And you should be proud of that, whether it's advocacy or not. Okay, yeah. But we do shows about Native American Film Festival, about genocide, because I'm there. My colleagues are interested in those issues, but they don't always think about that. My producer from Iran, she comes to the table with so much information about Syria and Yemen and things that maybe I wouldn't because that's not where my eye is focused. But that's why diversity is so, so important. So, I would say don't go into an outlet and just be there sort of, what am I supposed to do here? You're bringing your own experience to the table and we need more of that. So I really encourage that. And I'd love to hear about what you're interested in and what you ultimately want to do. I think someone has a microphone.
Hello. So my question, I guess it's more of like a comment/question, but I just brought it up because I'm the editor-in-chief of the magazine at the school, and we're running a story on a Project Rebound here, which helps like, formerly incarcerated people get through school and get a college degree. And so we are running this story and utilizing it to speak about like the school to prison pipeline. But it's so hard, and especially we have a journalist of color as the reporter and me editing her story. It's hard to, I'm always trying to back myself up. Every sentence you have to fact check it, where any other topic you don't. And that's just because I feel like, especially this, and in this department, you're conditioned to be as unbiased as possible, but it's nearly impossible when you are a living testament to the experience you're trying to talk about. And separating yourself from that, it's getting more difficult, especially when you don't have the autonomy to self-fund and all of that. When we go into the industry, there is going to be kind of a corporate hand kind of dictating what we're writing about too. So, and even at this stage. And so how do you go around that basically? It's how
this is for the school paper?
Correct, the magazine, yeah.
Oh, school magazine, okay. Why do you feel like you have to fact check every sentence unlike other stories?
Because to say that the black body is overly policed, that is immediately a claim. And I wrote a story last semester, and as soon as it was published, a lot of people were coming up to me, well, this is editorialized, this is editorialized, this is editorialized, and you're taught that editorializing your paper is a bad thing to do. And so you always are just hyper vigilant on trying to keep yourself from that. And it's such a frustrating and exhausting process. And then there's no kind of freedom in that in my immediate future. So it's like, I don't want to be put into a box of like, oh, you just have very extreme things to say, and we're going to call you an advocacy journalist, and that's that. So it's like, how can you function in the industry like everybody else, but yet have these perspectives that are true to you and your experience?
Well, I mean, you can write an op-ed, but I understand why you wouldn't want to. The other thing is you can back up that claim with statistics.
Which we do.
Because, what you said, I mean, what was it, the police, I forgot the organization that just came out 2 days ago and apologized to communities of color. I can find it. But there's so much data you can use to back up sentences like that. I mean, that's the thing with advocacy journalism. Just getting ready for this talk, I was reading about these journalists from the late 1800s, early 1900s, who proudly called themselves, there was this radical journalism that went on back then. These newspapers were proudly taking a political slant. Fair and Balanced did not get uttered back then. But what they did is they backed up their claims with fact. Or they would go undercover into a child labor camp and say, look, this is happening. So I would say what you're saying is completely true. It's really hard to argue with that today. And you can easily back up that information with fact. Or you can find someone who has dealt with this personally and get a quote from that person. But I totally understand what you're saying. This is, for people of color, people who have experiences around these issues, it can take an emotional toll. Yeah, and I think that's important. As journalists, I think it's important to acknowledge that and really talk about it. And I think that's why, to your question about advocacy, I think it's important to be honest about these things and not pretend. Because, I mean, let's be honest, we're living in a country with so much wealth, and there's so much suffering and inequality right now, and it's unacceptable to have this. I mean, you probably have kids on campus who can't afford to eat, right? In the most expensive city in the country. I mean, that's unacceptable. And as journalists, we should feel comfortable saying that. I mean, that's why I got into this field. As you said, I could be I used to be a tech reporter. I could have gone to work for a tech company, and who knows where I'd be right now, but I didn't want to take that route. I wanted to shine a light on these things and make things better. I think that's the goal of journalism, and we should take that back.
I'll pass over the mic, but just the whole thing of like, even when you do provide statistics, so your job is immediately twice as hard, because something you could just say, now you have to prove with data, with quotes, with extra reporting.
Yeah.
And it's understandable, but it's like it's because you're immediately categorized as the biased person trying to make a very biased point. And why is that? Like, I always kind of think about when I learned about abolitionist journalism, that was now we just frame it as abolition journalism, but back then that was just like blasphemy to say anything like that, and to think that, but now we look at it as like a very pivotal part of this history of journalism.
Right.
But like now, if we take that stance now, what are we considered? And that's just kind of something I've been thinking about, but I appreciate it.
Well, I think, what's more important though is when you're doing this story, or for photojournalist or documentary photographer, there's a problem when we cannot spend so much time to do the story. My suggestion for students is, while you're a student, do stories that you are not comfortable. Spend time in those communities and learn who they are, how they live, and be comfortable with them. Because once you're out there working for a newspaper and you're assigned to an area, the first thing you like to do is go in and out so fast, and you don't have the whole story in your files, or you don't have anything to write. You don't have a good quote from somebody. And there are situations like that. So my suggestion is, be comfortable in those areas. For those of you who are people of color, and this is very important, you don't like 20 years from now or 30 years from now, your children will be writing about who we are, and the one they're quoting is not somebody from us. It's so important that we ourselves tell our own story, because no matter what, how good a journalist is, there's something inside us that can capture the essence of the story, because we feel it, you experience it day in and day out. And for me, that's so important. It's one of those things that I cherish so much, that if I can do something for my community and tell that story. Because you say, oh, the racism, it happens, you're stopped and things like that. But some people like us, I'm even afraid to go somewhere. I'm driving a nice car, I'm educated, and yet I'm scared, because I know myself, if something happens and I'm accused of something wrong, I will react and I will be killed. So it's so important that for people of color to tell our own story, help others understand, and that's our responsibility. Your friends, your neighbors, your girlfriends, whatever, because we have to spread the knowledge among everyone. And collectively, it's our responsibility to tell the voices and tell the story with the voices of our subjects. It's not us. It's not how we compose pictures. It's not how good our camera is. It's not how, all this Photoshop that we're doing. It's not about that. It's always about them.
And I also would say that media outlets are really trying to diversify, and they're now doing a better job of keeping track of staff. I mean, NPR has really improved in this department. And just the other day, I found a story from KUT, it's Austin's NPR station, and here's the headline: "We don't have any Black reporters on staff, and we know that's a problem." Right? So they're admitting that this is a problem, which is a major step from even 3 years ago. And they're saying, okay, this is not right. We just opened a temporary bureau to look at the socioeconomic and racial cultural makeup of this historically Black neighborhood in East Austin, and we have no Black reporters. Something needs to change. It's a huge, at least they're admitting this and starting a conversation about it.
I want to say, though, I was at a conference in Minneapolis over the summer, and there was an editor there from the Minneapolis Post, and he said during his speech, our newsroom is not as culturally or politically diverse as we'd like it to be. And I asked him after his talk, well, what are you doing about it? And he kind of hemmed and hawed and, and I said, do you have an internship program? Oh, no, well, we don't have an internship program. And I said, are you going out recruiting? Are you well, we don't really have that many spots to fill. And like I say, I think that there's, to some extent, a recognition that there needs to be more diverse staffs. But I'm still not seeing the commitment to change. I mean, come here. I told him that. I said, I have a bunch of students. Come to San Francisco State. We have a really diverse student population here.
We've got a question.
Yeah.
Oh, it's okay. I just kind of wanted to piggyback on what you were saying on the hard stories and having to fact check everything. And I read this report on how basically people who go against the grain are their credibility is consistently undermined and stuff. And so that's a really hard place to be, especially when you're bringing light to issues like the Dakota Access Pipeline and all the terrible things that are going on in this country. And I just also wanted to ask, there's the line between advocacy and journalism, and I think that that line of balance shouldn't be there, or it should be there, but not in the sense that we have today, where we had it from the 1900s with the reporters that are going undercover and stuff. But it's how do you bridge that how do you bridge coming from this old journalism that tries to focus on a balanced point of view to something that's more okay, this is what's important, and this is what we need to talk about, and how do you go about I'm not sure if that makes sense, but how it's where do you find the medium in that? That's what I.
Well, I don't know if I'm the right person to answer that question because I've never been balanced at all. And that's the truth, because there are things that has to be said, has to be written, and has to be printed on the page, on television, and on the web, because those are the truth. As long as you're saying the truth, there's nothing wrong about that. People will not accept everything we say, because there are people out there who will say that's untruthful, that's fraud, and that's acceptable, because it's impossible to convince everyone. But it will be an error on our part not to tell the truth. And because that's the most important part. And slowly but surely we'll get there. But it's going to be hard because at every step of the way, as we grow up in this country, in the newsroom and everywhere, there are forces out there trying to slow us down. No, that's not the issue. That's another issue. And if this issue is so strong, it has to be balanced with something else. Even just to minimize the truthfulness of what you're saying. Okay? So if you believe on the truth, just go ahead and forget others, whatever they say to you.
I second that. Also, the first part of your question, can you explain that a little more? You were feeling like people don't want to hear about these issues?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people are just kind of like glancing past it, or they're just it's like when you see a bunch of horror or gore or a car accident or whatever,
yeah.
But the images of constantly seeing that kind of desensitizes you,
right?
And it's I don't want to be jaded so early, and I feel jaded, and I haven't even graduated.
Wow.
So I'm just how do you even
well, okay. I don't want you to be jaded either. And think about why you're doing what you're doing and what drives you the most. I would also read more about the power of journalism and the power of journalism to change things. When you were talking about prisons in the Philippines, it made me think about the story about Khalif Browder. Have you all heard about Khalif Browder? So in 2010, he was just 16, and he was accused of robbing a man of his backpack, and he was jailed. He was a young black man. And he was sent to Rikers in New York. This isn't a prison that's infamous for beatings of juveniles and solitary confinement. He was caught in the system for 3 years because his family couldn't pay for bail, and he was in solitary. and he was beaten, and it was videotaped, okay, for allegedly stealing a backpack, which he said he did not do. The family was unable to pay $3,000 in bail. And his mental health deteriorated, his physical health deteriorated. When he went back home, and this was in New York, his mom said that he would go out on the driveway and just walk along the four sides of the driveway because he was losing his mind, and he eventually committed suicide. His mother recently, just 2 days ago, she died, and the lawyer said she died of a broken heart. She was only 63. And I'm telling you this because the New Yorker found out about Kalief Browder and wrote this amazing story about him. And from there, it just took off like wildfire. And other publications followed. And then President Obama wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post in January talking about his plan to ban solitary confinement for juveniles in federal prisons. And in California, Governor Jerry Brown just signed a law to also ban solitary confinement for juveniles. So what I would say to you is anytime you get jaded, find something like this, shield yourself from the noise because it can really drive you mad. And find stories like this or something that you care about, and then look at the effect that it's had. Because I think all of the noise aside, I mean, journalism can stop a war, can also start a war. It can pass, it can give politicians the ammunition they need to pass legislation to end solitary confinement. I mean, this is massive. I think journalism is so, so powerful, and that gets lost in all of these conversations and all of this just stuff that we have to deal with right now with this election. So I totally get it, and if you get jaded, go there, but find something that kind of makes you realize why you want to get into this profession to begin with. And I would say we need you. It's a hard profession right now to get into, but we really, really need people with diversity, with passion, people from different backgrounds to get involved in the profession. That's what I would say.
Yeah, just like an extension to that question, as a journalist, how do you even get your audience or even your editor interested in a topic of importance when all anyone wants to talk about is the loudest thing in the room? And the loudest thing in the room for the past year has been Donald Trump. So how do you get that engagement with the community?
Pitching stories is not easy. What you need is contacts and connections. And so I would say, I'm sure you have all kinds of events at San Francisco State, and you're lucky because a lot of publications are in this area and a lot of journalists are in this area. So I would say, because of social media and email, every journalist has an email. I would write to the person that's writing about what you want to write about, or someone who works for the publication you want to write for. Tell them that you're a student at San Francisco State or maybe a recent graduate and you're interested in writing about this. Now, depending on what they're doing with their lives, they might not write you back. Don't take that personally, because a lot of people are very busy or busier than they think they are. And so I would say just keep trying. And it's difficult. I mean, I'm writing a piece for Standing Rock for the Nation because I know people at the Nation. And I wrote a story a couple of years ago about older homeless women living on the streets of San Francisco. And so it's just creating those relationships. But there are also cases of, writing someone blindly and they write you back and say, yes, I'd like this. So I would say you have to be persistent because you can get rejection after rejection after rejection, and you just can't give up.
I think the first thing you have to ask yourself if you're pitching a story is, was the story been done before? And can you do better than that? And the next question is there another angle that you can share to the audience, to the reading public, a different perspective, a different point of view? And then when you call the editor, and usually in my situation, I've used this a lot, is what do you have? Something you don't have. Which means say, okay, let's take a look. Because editors, especially picture editors, they only have several areas that they like. But we have to come there with something different, something that they have not seen, something that they have not, considered as an option for visual journalists. So that's an area. And then, but don't go there unprepared. You really have to do your research work. You really have to prepare all your materials, because once you get turned down, that's it. It's hard to go back, because the first impression is so, because whenever I'm doing a story, I spend so much time researching, talking to people, getting point of view, because I always feel this way. If I start to feel the anger, the anxiety, the pain, the heartache of my subjects, that's the only time I can produce the picture that tells their story. Once I don't have that yet, it's impossible, because I'm still contributing my point of view to them. But you really have to capture that essence of your subject, how they feel about themselves and their story, because it's the only way to capture it. Because by that time you're doing it, every picture you take represents who they are, and not somebody else.
You're talking about the importance of telling other people's stories and telling your own story, especially if you're of minority. I just had an idea and wanted to hear your various viewpoints on it. What do you think of asking others to write their own stories and attempting to publish them? And can you publish said story without it becoming an op-ed or an opinion piece?
You mean asking someone else to tell their own, like have someone else write their own story?
Yes, have someone else write their own story, and then at least attempting to get that published in a paper.
Yeah, well, you can do an as told by. That's one way. But I did some work with the op-ed project, and what we try to do is we just try to raise the number of diverse voices on the op-ed pages, because what percentage do you think of op-eds are written by women? What percentage?
Under 25.
Under 25? It's about 12 to 15%. So what we try to do is I actually worked with activists in Dallas, Texas, who run nonprofits, and I helped them write op-eds to get published. We got published in The Guardian, in Christian Science Monitor, so many different publications. So that's one example. And I have no problem doing that, helping people write a pitch and then shaping the article, because if you haven't done it before, obviously everyone needs guidance. I mean, even I need an editor, right? Everybody does. So that's really important. Mentors, so important. I highly recommend trying to find a mentor, even if you're still in college, just someone you can check in with, or, go visit a radio station. I mean, we've got KALW, we've got KQED, KPFA. We're lucky to have 3 really good public radio stations in the Bay Area. There's newspapers, magazines, Mother Jones is here. Everybody likes to talk about themselves. So if you call an editor and say, hi, can I get 10 minutes of your time to find out how you got this gig? People would love that. Everyone loves talking about themselves. So that's a really good way to get in and see how things work, and then see if that's what you want to do. It's a really great way. I hope that answered your question.
I think so. It just, or I guess another question is, what do you think? What other ways do you think are really effective in telling other people's stories? Like, what do you think, or what do you think are the most effective ways to tell someone else's story? I mean, or have someone else tell their own story?
When I was at Standing Rock, I did video interviews, like 5-minute video interviews to post. Facebook Live is amazing now. Do you all know about that? So when you go on Facebook Live, it's streaming in real time. After my radio show or during the show, we do interviews with people for basically, what didn't we get to during the show? 5-minute clip. That's a way, but I like features to tell stories, people's stories. There's many ways now, right? I mean, I just took a picture here, and while you were talking, I was writing down some of the things you were saying, and I'm going to put it on my Facebook page just to show the work that he's doing and let people know that we're here today.
And that's a great example of how, you don't have to be working for a big news organization. You can start just on Facebook and then take it from there. And I think if as a journalist, you're constantly looking for stories and constantly seeing stories. The fact that Rose saw a story here and started writing it while she's on a panel. I mean, that's journalism,
Yeah,
folks.
and it's also good practice. Like, what was the most interesting thing that was said today, right? You take a few notes. I always put a picture, a quote, the title, and a link. And it gets shared a lot. And then you never know what's going to happen with it. It could take off. Someone might say, oh, wow, can you tell me more about that? What did you do there? I just took a picture of all of you, if you don't mind. I was going to ask you and say, I'm at this panel. Here's our future journalists, and they're asking fantastic questions. Maybe we should hang out with them tonight instead of watching the debate, or hear your analysis of the debate tonight.
Express News.
Yeah.
I think there's a question here. And I think this will have to be our last question, unfortunately.
Hi. I also, this thing doesn't work, but should we keep using it? Okay, I just want to make sure. I was just wondering, I think that everyone has kind of like their own way of digesting news, and I think that it's a way that works specifically for some people and it doesn't work for others. And I was just wondering if you see merit in a certain way. So I personally love reading The New Yorker. I love the way that they write their stories. I love that they use a lot of personal anecdotes to tell their story and to help people understand what's going on in the news. But I know that that's a certain kind of audience and it's not everybody's audience. And, you know, as a journalist, I'm wondering if there is merit in staying true to writing that kind of journalism or being kind of versatile and trying to be a jack of all trades in a way.
Yeah, I think this is something. Don't aspire for something too big. My advice to you guys is train yourself to convince the person next to you. Because by doing that practice, that training of convincing somebody, either with your words, with your pictures, with your writing and everything like that, it develops a confidence on our part that we are capable of convincing others. So as we grow, we keep doing this and doing this, then our confidence becomes stronger. And that's the time when you start from low going up and up, because it's impossible to start from the top, and because you get there down. You also have to accept the fact that there are so many rejections in our industry. And when you're rejected, your first reaction is, oh, you rejected me? I'll be back with you and prove to you that you're wrong. Because with that kind of attitude, you're always saying, no, you're wrong, I'm right, and I'll prove to you. It's a conviction on ourselves. We may be wrong, but at the same time, we are telling ourselves, no, I'm good enough for this, and I'm gonna try to prove it myself to you, to everyone. But the first step is really to convince our friends of our ideas. Because if you cannot convince me with your idea, how can you expect to convince others to believe in you? So that's a special training that all of us has to have.
You know, when I think about this question, I think that I'm so glad I didn't have the internet when I was mostly in high school. I had it at the end of college, but I think it would have completely overwhelmed me. Unfortunately, I think you have to be a jack of all trades these days. And you can start in little steps. So on your Facebook page, you can take a picture of this panel and say, you know, we just had a panel discussion about advocacy and journalism. Here's what I got out of it. It just gives you practice to turn things around quickly, because you have to do that with a lot of media that we're in now. You know, taking photos. I just got this phone because there's a lot of video storage on it. So I can do long interviews with people, cut it up, throw it on, or do a Facebook Live interview, which means that I have to be on. You don't want to stumble. You want to have your facts together. But it's such good practice to use social media in this way. And I would say you might write a long form feature, you know, 1 month, and then the next month you might write smaller pieces. And maybe you might even be asked to do a radio interview to talk about your long feature. So then you have to think about presentation and taking the words like and completely out of your vocabulary. I will say, as a radio person, I hear a lot of young people say like a lot. And so there's just little tricks. And I think, you know, it's up to us who are in the field to share these tricks with all of you. I would highly recommend, especially the women, if I can be honest with you. My first job out of college, my voice was really high and I got a lot of hate mail from men. And my boss brought me in the room and he said, okay, here's the deal. You're in a profession that is male dominated and you're gonna have to work twice as hard as the men. From here on out, take like and out of your vocabulary. Never say those words again, because your credibility is lost when you stumble and say like and Don't do it just at work, but also at home. And as you can see, sometimes it slips in, but I mostly don't say it. And after about 2 years, the confidence level came up and I started getting really weird love letters from my listeners. So a complete 180 happened. But there's all these little tricks. And again, write to the person that you admire, the person that does the work that you want to do. And if they're a nice person, they're not always going to write back, but they probably will. And if that person doesn't, write to someone else. And I just think that's so, so important, because it's hard right now to get into this field and make money. I'll be honest with you, but there are opportunities. You just have to put yourself out there. You know, in one sense, maybe back in the day, jobs would fall in your lap. That doesn't happen really anymore. You really have to go for it. So find what you're really passionate about, because once you find that, that's going to come across in the work that you do. And then you're going to find a home for it. So, you know, if you ever want to come to KALW, my show airs every day from 10 to 11 and it's live. Come by anytime. We'd be happy to show you the newsroom. I can connect you with other reporters if you want to work at a newspaper or a magazine. I think it's just so important to put yourself there and, you know, find out what it's really like after you finish school.
Find a good mentor.
Yeah.
There are many out there willing to share their experiences. I don't know if you've heard about Saisa Cruz Bacani, who is a domestic helper in Hong Kong that I discovered through Facebook. And she's now doing work for New York Times, one of top 100 BBC women in the world, doing exhibitions, selling prints for more than $1,000 each, and traveling all over the world. Wow. And part of the reason why she's successful, not because I'm helping her, is because I made sure that she does not make the same mistakes that others are doing when they're starting. You can compress the learning curve if you have somebody helping you to avoid those mistakes. Just don't repeat the mistakes. But somebody can help you accelerate your learning curve or your career. And there are many out there willing to help people. Because like for myself, I don't know anything about journalism. I don't know anything about photography. A lot of people helped me when I was starting. And I'm giving back. I'm giving back now. I use Facebook as a tool to influence others' ideas. I use Facebook for my political views. It's not about what we eat and where you go. I photographed Mark Zuckerberg when he was starting, and that's why I remember, use Facebook as a promotional vehicle for your ideas, for your whatever you feel, and use that to network and meet people. And it's very effective. You have to use all the elements we have available to improve ourselves.
All right, thank you so much for this inspiring time.
You guys are why I have all the sweets. I'm diabetic, that's why I have to get some sweets.
Food downstairs if you have a few minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry for the switch up late. Great job. Oops. Sorry.
Oh, what's your name? Huh?